We elect a new president. The signs change, the slogans change, and the things that actually decide our rent, our wages, the price of our medicine barely move. In 2026, we finally got to see why, out loud, on the record. The biggest thing happening in America isn't a crash, it's a reveal. The largest corporations, and the small number of people who own them, have been setting the limits on every administration for decades. The president has been the face, not the final say. And in 2025, the strings stopped being hidden. We can see them in three places: the machinery that pulls them, the trust being spent to do it, and the gap that shows whose hand is really on the lever. Which raises a strange question. If the limits are set no matter who wins, why keep electing anyone at all? Hold that. Start with what nobody argues about. The U.S. government owes just under $39 trillion. This spring, for the first time since World War II, that debt grew larger than the entire American economy. Moody's stripped the last perfect credit rating last year. Borrowing costs hit their highest in years. Inflation came back, prices up nearly 4%, gas up almost 30%. And after inflation, the average paycheck bought less this year than last. Which raises the question every comment section is shouting, who actually owns that $39 trillion, and who collects the interest on it? The internet has two answers, and both are wrong. One says the dollar is dying and America collapses next quarter. The other says, nothing's wrong, the markets are fine, relax. The honest version is quieter than the first, and far more disturbing than the second. Critically, on the evidence, the dollar is not collapsing. Its reserve share slipped, but the IMF found 92% of last year's drop was just exchange rate math, not anyone fleeing. A former Treasury official notes the U.S. doesn't even reliably know who holds its own debt, so the people declaring an exodus are reading numbers they don't have. And the second correction matters more. This is not a hidden cabal. There is no secret room. What makes it serious is the opposite. It is legal, it is on the record, and neutral institutions are measuring it. The strings were always there. 2026 is just the year they became visible. Pillar 1. The machinery. This year, the Supreme Court gave whoever holds the White House the power to remove the heads of independent agencies at will, the referees that regulate banks, drug companies, polluters, monopolies. And it pointedly carved out one exception, the Federal Reserve, which tells us the court knew exactly how load-bearing that wall is. The owners can buy almost anything. There is one thing they still can't. Keep connecting. When the court struck down the administration's corporate tariffs, a replacement order, picking which companies win and which lose, was signed within hours. In 15 months, judges found the government had violated their orders in at least 31 separate cases. The Justice Department opened a criminal investigation into the chair of the Federal Reserve. He refused to leave, saying he would not go until the investigation was well and truly over. And here's the part that proves this isn't one party's project. Every living Fed chair and 5 former Treasury secretaries from both parties signed onto the Supreme Court together to defend the Fed's independence. The strings run through revolving doors and donor dependence that took decades to build, under presidents of every color. The puppet changes, the hand doesn't. Pillar 2. The trust. For 80 years, U.S. debt has been the safest asset on earth. Not because America pays easily, but because lenders trusted the machinery, rules that don't bend for whoever is richest. That trust is the collateral. It is the reason the interest rate stays low while the debt goes vertical. Now measure it. V-Dem, the world's largest democracy tracking project, based at a Swedish university with no stake in American politics, reclassified the United States this year from a liberal democracy to merely an electoral one, and called the speed faster than any democracy in modern history. An independent panel of American scholars watched their own rule of law score fall by 1/5 in 5 months. The authors who wrote the book on how democracies die now argue America has already crossed into something they call competitive authoritarianism. That is the one thing the owners cannot print, cannot vote themselves, and cannot buy back once it's gone: credibility. And it is now being independently measured, going down. Pillar 3. The gap. And this is the part everyone feels before they can prove it. To know who really holds the strings, the cleanest test is simple. Who does the economy serve? The wealthiest 1% of Americans hold a record share of the nation's wealth, about a third. The bottom half holds 2.5%. The slice of the economy that goes to people who work, instead of people who own, is the lowest in over 70 years. The top 10% now drive roughly half of all consumer spending. That is the K, one line up, one line down, and the average on the news hides both. The economy is great, and I can't afford my life are both data. The gap is the receipt. Now the dots close. Why keep electing anyone? Because the election was never the lever, it was the legitimacy. A visible vote is what makes the public accept the outcome. The presidency's real product was never policy. It was consent. But consent runs on the same trust that finances $39 trillion at low rates, and that is the one thing the owners can't manufacture. Researchers can already see the channel. As confidence in the machinery slips, the extra interest lenders' demand rises with it. The bond market is starting to put a number on it. And here's the part the puppeteers didn't price in. That bill doesn't land on the owners. It lands on the budget that funds everyone else. Remember the very first line? That we change presidents and the things that decide our rent and wages barely move? That was never a coincidence. It is the machine running exactly as built. And the $39 trillion? We owe it partly to ourselves, partly abroad, but the interest increasingly flows upward to the same tier that already holds the wealth. Debt service, quietly, has become one of the largest upward transfers in the country. They stopped believing us. Was never going to be one dramatic default. It looks exactly like this: a slow burn, two Americas drifting apart while the strings stay attached. The commenters were right. It is a slow burn, not an explosion. Here's the discipline the doom channels skip. Brookings, same numbers, puts the odds of a sudden severe crisis as quite low. This is erosion, not 1929, and there is a real, honest disagreement. Critics call this capture. Defenders call it ordinary influence and pro-growth deregulation. We don't have to hand down a verdict to read the instruments, and the instruments, measured by people with no incentive to lie, all bend the same way. The lever that turns it back was never a gold can in a basement. It is structural, the same machinery, repaired, and pointed back at the public. So, is something big happening in America? Yes. Just not the thing on the thumbnails. It is a country watching, in real time, the strings it was never supposed to see. The honest question isn't whether it collapses. It is whether the strings get cut before the trust runs out. And a short list of countries has done exactly that. That is where we go next. What taking the lever back actually looked like, and who pulled it off. We'll follow the thread together, one dot at a time.